All right, guys. So we're here with
Samurai Dan
and
Jillian.
My wife beats me a lot, and sometimes it takes me a minute to remember who I am.
You're 6 foot. She looks to be about 5'8", and she beats you.
She's meaner than I am. She's much more willing to win, and that's one of the things. If you train in martial arts, you learn in a hurry. Is that the girls are meaner than the guys are. At our school, that's something you learn very quickly.
So she's the head sensei, you're the assistant.
Seems that way, doesn't it?
So, you do martial arts as well as have a, I'm guessing, wonderful collection of ancient weapons.
Yes, but the ancient weapons kind of came about because we trained in martial arts. When we first started in Japanese sword, it was a big deal to spend the $10 on getting a wooden bokken or practice sword. And then doing what we do is kind of an overwhelming passion. It started off as we have class once a week on Saturday, and that wasn't enough, so we started having our own workout times, and then it grew into, for a while, 7 days a week, training, teaching.
How long have you been doing that for? Without being too revealing about the age.
I started training in Japanese sword in 1996. So it's been almost 18 years we've been doing Japanese sword. Before that, I did Jeet Kune Do, Junfan Bruce Lee's martial art, for 6 years, and was training in full contact karate kickboxing.
How difficult was it to do the Bruce Lee martial arts? Considering there's a big height difference as well as that dude just moved like there was no tomorrow.
The thing about his art, his system wasn't about taking a boxer and making him into a wrestler, or taking a wrestler and making him into a boxer. It was to take a boxer and make him into a better fighter. And so you stayed with your strengths, but the excess things, some of the silly poses and the concepts that didn't really work out in reality, were supposed to be stripped away, and effective techniques were added. For me, the difficulty was when I started in that, I didn't have a strong background in any single art first. And one of the things Bruce Lee was famous for was he took black belts that were established in the system and stripped away the excess and added other things. So there was already a framework, a trunk to the tree, if you will, and you added branches from this eclectic collection of other martial arts. And so for me, what I settled on was Muay Thai kickboxing, because it was a very basic, very demanding martial art involving knees and elbows. And that helped me a lot, because I am 6'7", and I'm still thin, but I weigh 254 pounds now. When I started training, I weighed 179. I was skinny, and so everybody thought we're going to move in close and fight close to him, so he can't punch and kick, and I can get inside his guard. And Muay Thai kickboxing uses knees and elbows. And at my height and lankiness, I could throw elbows where most people could throw a right cross, and an elbow has a lot more velocity and impact. And throwing a knee from close range, if you do it correctly, I can lift a 300-pound man off the ground with a knee strike to the abdomen. So even if you cover up and block, it's still going to do damage. And
I want you to lift me up off the ground, but I really don't want to get through. It's very downside for my.
Yeah, I'm sorry, you can't have it both ways.
So, being that you're 6'7", you've got the look, you've done one time. Have you ever done any cosplay before? Because you could do Sagat from Street Fighter. He's a big dude that does Muay Thai kickboxing. You're at an anime convention.
I'm at an anime convention, and truthfully, we get hired to do 35 to 40 anime conventions a year, and I absolutely love it. I love the kids, I love the environment, I love all of it, but I don't know anything about anime. I'm not interested in learning about anime. I'm old, and I'm set in my ways, and I want to learn. We talked before, it's about sensory removal and serious martial arts stuff, and the anime stuff is the fun side to me. And I'm the first time I saw cosplay, I had no idea what it was. I was scared out of my mind because I'm an Iowa farm kid, and I saw guys dressed as girls, girls dressed as guys, and then a group of people dressed as squids. I mean, that was kind of the tentacle monster was, I had nightmares because I first thought it was something from 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and then found out otherwise.
That was a different 20,000
so it was completely different, but it was fabulous. I love cosplay because that is everybody's chance to get up on stage and have the approval and admiration of your peers. I mean, whether you're a voice actor or Harrison Ford or, whatever Michael Jordan, they're used to the spotlight and the limelight. and feeling important, if you will. But cosplay was everybody's chance to be able to get up and have people take their pictures and think they were neat and reward them for the time and effort they spent on their costumes. So I love that part of anime. And I've been a judge for cosplay, and we frequently perform during intermission while the judges, compare notes and figure out what they're doing. It's my job to get up and talk and get beat up by my wife because people are amused by that.
I'm not going to say I want to see it, but I'm not going to say I don't.
She's broken my nose before. Not on stage. We were cuddling.
You made the wrong comment, didn't you?
Yeah, but you can edit this. Unless this is a live feed. In which case, I'm sorry, Mom.
So, as an Iowa farm kid, what led you to martial arts?
I hated my brother.
No. Valid answer.
I was always fascinated with martial arts and swordplay. I'm old enough that when I was a kid, there was no internet. There was no cable TV yet. We read books. And one winter, my dad read part of The Hobbit to us from Tolkien. It was the scene where the dwarves were captured by the giant spiders. And Bilbo rescued them, throwing the pine cones and calling them names and stuff. And I was so captivated by that sci-fi that the next year I waded through the books myself. And they don't seem like they're really that complicated. But if you're 10 years old, reading The Lord of the Rings took forever. That second book, the Two Towers, the Ent section, I swear, eons passed while I was trying to read that stuff.
Did you go fully through puberty while you were finishing the book?
According to my wife, I haven't hit puberty yet. So I started reading those books, and I was fascinated with sword combat and stuff. I loved it when most kids were playing cops and robbers, and I did that, but I got into Greek mythology, and I was Perseus with the shining shield, and I learned early from Greek mythology to be afraid of women because the Medusa was nasty. Don't look at girls, you'll turn to stone.
You did say there was a broken nose once.
3 times.
Hey, I'm only responsible for one.
You really like baiting her, don't you?
And I didn't actually start teasing her this much, but when we perform on stage, our stage show is predicated on the audience cheering her on and being against me. And so I have to find ways that put everybody on her side without people just literally hating me and thinking I'm an arrogant jerk. So I joke, but it's always kind of putting her down a little bit. So when we get on stage and she wins the sword fight, people cheer. Because before we did that, we'd actually have people booing that she won. And I'm like, okay, you're really doing this wrong. I know everybody likes rooting for the bad guy, but do I look like Loki to you? I'm horny, but that's not the... You can edit that.
Oh, wow. I'm totally not editing that. No, I'm just kidding.
It's okay.
How long
That's
have you
great
been married?
It's a deep
Forever. Oh. Hi.
Hi.
See, I did it again. 11 years? Is it 12 years now?
Almost.
Oh, God.
Yes, you have an anniversary coming up.
You due for another nose break. So we've been married for 12 years, and one of the beauties of what we do, and having a son that has grown up in my footsteps that runs the martial arts school while we're gone, is that I get to do something the other guests don't. I get to travel with my wife. I mean, sometimes it's too much. I don't think so, but she does. She'll just tell me, I need some away time. I'm going horseback riding. Don't even think about following me.
My phone is off.
Because she needs to get away from me. But we get to travel together. So Saturday night, when we're done performing, it's not lonely, go out to dinner with the guest handler that I may or may not like. I get to go out with my wife, who I already know I don't like. So there's no stress involved. I'm not sure I said the right thing.
No, that's fine.
Yeah, it is for you. You don't have to go back to the room with her.
You can't turn it off. We understand.
We're viewing
Once you
this as
turn
an
it on.
advantage for us. Maybe not for you. But some great extra DVD special features.
So with
Do you know
all
what
the
she does on our DVDs? I'm sorry, I'll come back. Our first DVD, we finally got talked into selling DVDs as a way to make some extra money for us, but also we do panels, and I I kind of go fast from one thing to the next and talk and joke, and sometimes the amount of information is overwhelming. So we put it on DVD so people can get it and take it home. And our first Sword DVD, while it was being filmed, the guy that came in to do, she's the boss. I'm just a performing monkey. So while I'm showing everything, you don't have to agree with me now. She's talking to the director and they're figuring things out. And we were doing the test cutting part. So I've got the cutting stand in front of me and a sword, and I cut the mat, and they go, all right, wait. And they were talking something, angle change, lighting, something. And I'm bored and armed. It's a bad combination for me. So I'm swinging the sword around while they're talking, and I notice the red light on the camera's off. And I'm swinging to the left, swinging to the right. And that's lyrics to a Warrant song called Cherry Pie from the 80s. So I start singing and swinging the sword. Swing it to the left, think about baseball, swing all night, yeah, and pop up towards the camera. And that's when I noticed the red light's on again. Because she had the remote, saw what I was doing, and went, this might be cute.
Click.
And they didn't tell me, but when they produced the DVDs, they put it in the outtakes.
We're gonna buy this DVD.
The DVD. And they didn't tell me. And the first convention, we did Anime St. Louis, and we were selling these DVDs, and that was on Friday night after our sword class. On Saturday, I walked out on stage to do our stage show, and like the entire section of the college students started singing, "She's my," and I just went bright red. Not stage pretending to be embarrassed. I was mortified. Because there's a lot of things I'll do to be silly and to get a reaction, but I can't sing, and I'm very self-conscious about it. And they have me on tape.
That's awesome.
And you wonder why I make fun of it.
And this DVD's still on sale, correct?
Oh yeah, nobody watches the sword information on it. They just jump to the end to make fun
I'll
of
watch the sword information, and then I'll watch the Cherry
That's pretty
Pie.
awesome. Are you guys involved in charities?
We do work with a lot of different charities. Not usually very many specifically, but we work with a lot of women's groups, a lot of battered women's groups on self-defense concepts and support for situations like that.
RAIN is one of them. It's Midwest-based, and youth shelters, runaway teens, those sorts of things. There's so many worthy causes in the world, and we have such limited finances, not to be put too fine a point on it. But what we do have are skills in helping people be able to protect themselves, at least physically, and let people know it's okay to fight back and to at least resist and not be a victim. And so we spend a lot of time working with disadvantaged kids and women. I'd like to pretend it's a nice world and we do what we do just to be funny and to enjoy ourselves. But the truth is, if somebody puts their hands on you and you don't want them there, you have every right to enforce your own personal space and give their hand back to them. And after warning them once, it doesn't have to be attached to their body anymore.
Somebody grabbed me in Liverpool once and left bruises on my arm, but I beat him up and left. And then the next day I was like, wait a minute, I think I was in danger. I took self-defense.
Well, we have a student in a wheelchair. He's been training with us for 10 years. He's legally blind. And, legally, there's a difference between mostly dead and all dead. There's a difference between legally blind. He can still see shapes, but obviously he can't drive a car, even if he weren't also legally a quadriplegic. He's been training at our school for 10 years, and he was taking college classes, community college. Class got over, and he was sitting waiting for the handicap bus to come pick him up. It was right next to the regular bus stop. He had headphones on. He was listening to a Walkman. I mean, not even an MP3 player, a Walkman. And two college kids thought it'd be funny to steal from the blind guy in a wheelchair. And he may have overreacted, but then again, if you're going to steal from a guy who's blind in a wheelchair, you deserve what you get. This kid shot his hand in to grab the Walkman, and Paul blocked down, twisted his arm, in Japanese it's kotegaishi, it's a wrist lock, flipped him over the wheelchair and broke his arm.
Yes.
And we know that because 2 days later, it was a Tuesday, Thursday class. On Thursday, the kid showed up with his arm in a cast and said, "You broke my arm. I'm suing." And Paul said, "Fine, I'll call the police. Give me your phone. You can explain that you were trying to steal from the blind guy in a wheelchair," and he kicked your
You can say whatever you want.
Oh, sure. More rope to hang myself with. Thanks.
One of the neatest things, actually, for me, when we do conventions, we'll very frequently do a self-defense class as one of our panels. There's one thing for when you have people that have gone to a support group and they're there already, but we have randomly had, especially women across the country, where hearing him tell them, that you have a right to your personal space and no one should put their hands on you without permission, and you have the right to give those back, attached or not. And we've had women come up and say, it's the first time anyone has ever, that thought has even crossed my mind. And, they've literally come out to us about abuse and situations they've been in and gone to get help from that point forwards and found that empowerment. And that has been just one of the most amazing things, for us, for helping those people that haven't yet found that point of self-awareness and that they are special enough that they don't deserve that, and to bring them to that point. And that's one of the things that I really treasure about the self-defense class with, it's fun for everybody. And it's fun when you have different people that are very enthusiastic and, bouncy about it. And it's cool, we're doing martial arts. But when you reach those people that really need the help, just on a completely random basis, it's something very special too.
Well, after I took the self-defense class, it was just in college, and I had no idea that I was actually, it would just take like that. But the guy grabbed me and I stomped him and I hurt him. I don't know what I did, but it
just the
was
fact you reacted at all
and
is often the biggest thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, people need to know that they have that right. It's okay to do that.
And
I don't advocate violence. What I advocate is individual freedom. And just because violence isn't the answer. But you know what? If you're going to attack me, I'm going to protect myself until the answer comes along in the form of a squad car and officers with tasers, handcuffs, and...
Your favorite Facebook meme? When seconds count, the police are minutes away.
Yeah, and that's not a knock against police departments, because we work with the police in our area, and most of them have their children training at our school. But in our society, the police are there to try to keep the peace, and they're there after the violence happens, but until they show up. And individual self-defense, a woman knowing how to protect herself, is about women's rights. Because traditionally, if you want to go old school, a woman stayed home and was under the protection of her father until she was married off, and then she was under the protection of her husband. And a woman being able to take care of herself, to me, that's a step forwards for women's rights. And if guys don't like it, you should behave better.
So can I just take it and guess that you're actually under the protection of your wife?
You would think that, but she doesn't actually protect me when I need it. Because when those awkward situations happen at conventions where people are handsier than they should be, I would think at my size and vocation, I shouldn't have to worry about it, because a violent street altercation is one thing, and it doesn't bother me. If you're going to take a swing at me, and it still happens on occasion, people are misguided and stupid. It usually ends very, very
Like
quickly.
a 6'7" dude's not someone I would take a swing at.
Well,
There's people that lack your judgment.
and they're not long for the gene pool. Hopefully they'll weed it out before they reproduce and pass this defective feature on. But the whole people touching you. And we were at a convention. One of the things you teach girls is the first thing you do is make some noise. Let people know there's something wrong going on. So say no. Get people's attention. And then don't be afraid to embarrass the other person if you have to by telling them to stop. And we were at a convention. This guy came up and he was overly friendly with me. Way overly friendly. And he started petting me.
He petted you?
Like this. Really? And it's enough that it just kind of meant, we'll just pick random people and I'll
Was he a big man?
No,
he
this
was
is
this
like-
tiny little guy. And see, she's trying to do it, but she's doing it wrong, because you're actually, you're petting a cat. No, it has to be the little...
Really, really light touch and really, really slow.
That's creepy doing it.
Yes, it's creepy.
Did he make eye contact?
That's
Was he just
creepy.
looking at your arm?
Yeah.
How creepy.
And I was just... Oh! And I didn't say anything. I absolutely froze. And I realized I wasn't in danger of having my virtue taken. But it was, at least I hope. But I violated like every principle that I teach for I just stood there and I didn't say anything. I didn't get anybody's attention because I couldn't believe it was actually happening. And see, we're making this into a humorous thing, but when you talk to people who are victims of abuse, this is a humorous version of it, but the exact same things, sequence of events, happened. I couldn't believe it was actually happening, and I froze and I didn't say anything. I didn't do anything, and I looked around to see if anybody was paying attention, and no one was, so I let it go on because I didn't want to make a scene.
Hopefully not.
And I talked to girls and people that have been groped, fondled, and abuse has a tendency to escalate. So it starts like that, and then it gets worse and worse. And so I'm looking around, and normally when we do conventions, I have a handler, or we bring a helper, or my wife, and it's their job if we have an interview, or I need to go to lunch, or people are asking too many questions too long. You give them a sign, a code word. For a long time I used the term Van Halen. If I worked Van Halen into a sentence, that was code for get me out of here.
Safe word.
Yes.
A safe word. And people go, why Van Halen? If anybody remembers Van Halen's first album, Eddie Van Halen had a guitar solo on it that kind of set the industry standard for really cool guitar playing. It was called Eruption. That was the name of the solo, and it was on the album. And so we chose Van Halen because get me away from this person before I erupt and tear their arms off. But now I have to pick a different word because everybody will know it. But so I'm looking around going, Van Halen? Van Halen? And I look and my wife is at the end of the hallway. And I'm like, get me out. And I'm pointing because the guy's still there. And all she's doing is laughing at me. And I'm like,
After the crap you put
and
me
so I'm looking, there's a couple of friends, and I go and I stand by him, and this guy puts his hand between
rubbing.
And he keeps rubbing, and I'm going, and I look back down the hallway. My wife is still there, but by now she's gathered a crowd, and they're all pointing and laughing.
That sounds like too much of a douche. If there's a 6'7" guy and a 5'1" guy, and the 6'7" guy's getting petted, it's very hard not to laugh.
Yes.
But see,
Especially when you
don't
know
you think that's not fair? Because I am 6'7". This was a 5'1", 90-pound exchange kid from Norway. If I would have just trounced him for touching me,
You've been back.
oh yeah! How dare I hurt this poor innocent kid?
Who thought you were a Viking?
You thought you were a magical creature.
I was told he said to a friend he wanted to climb me like a mountain.
Wow. Sorry.
Oh, God.
I'm still in therapy over this. Don't laugh. But see, so now what we have is a humorous story to this. But the reason I started in Japanese sword because of The Hobbit, The Lord of the Rings. I grew up, I wanted to be Aragorn. Aragorn, Perseus, that kind of
Love the
thing.
segue.
The reason why we started into the self-defense thing and why we spend so much time with women's groups is I am an Iowa farm kid. There were 57 people in my graduating class. My entire high school, 7 through 12, had 451 people in it. And when I graduated, I went to the University of Iowa, and my first class had 600 people in it.
But you were excited.
And I was lost, terrified, and I know you have a hard time believing this now, but shy, painfully shy. And I sat next to, in a lecture, Western Civ, a girl who was also from another small town. And so we kind of talked to each other and bonded, and being freshmen, we both moved to the dorms. And so she went to Mardi Gras in New Orleans with her roommate, with her new friends. And while she was there, they got separated, and she got gang raped while she was at Mardi Gras. And they left her in an alley. And while she was in the alley, 3 guys were cutting through the alley, and she called out for help. And they didn't help her; they helped themselves. She got gang raped a second time. This was a long time ago. I'm older, but the last time I spoke to her, it's been a few years, but 20 years after that happened, she's still in therapy. There is no normal life for her. There is no dating. There is no trusting a man that she meets. And there's no trusting women. There's no trusting girls that want to go, hey, you want to go to a parade? Because the first thing in her mind is Mardi Gras, and her friends. And this is the reason why we do self-defense classes. This is why we're passionate about abuse victims. and make the joke that if a boy puts his hands on you and you don't want him there, give them back to him. They just don't have to be attached to his body. You know why? Because if somebody puts their hands on my wife, I'm a really nice guy. If you break into my house in the middle of the night, if I'm the only one home, I'm going to try to talk you down. Please put the knife down. You don't really want to hurt me. Here, I have a Mountain Dew. Let's sit down and talk about this. What's wrong? Are you feeling okay? If you break into my house and brandish a weapon at my wife, I will shoot you in the face with a bazooka. And I won't blink or think twice or feel bad about it. Well, it depends on, if I take out the TV behind you, then I'm going to feel bad because, Sports Center's on. But the difference there, and that's why we started doing self-defense and doing these classes for women and for girls. And I'm married, I'm straight. You know what? We do self-defense panels for gay and lesbian community too, because my wife worked at a pet shop with a guy who was out of the closet, very gay, and he got beat up outside a bar with the gay bashing things that you would think it's such a 70s and 80s stereotype thing, but it still goes on all over the country.
Purple Day seems to be.
And he sent pictures from the hospital bed.
Oh shit.
And to her and said, "Don't tell Dan." And you know why? Because if I would have found out who they were, I would have made them look worse than that. So we do, and because we have guys at conventions that come up and say, "I wanted to do your self-defense class, but I was too nervous and uncomfortable about it because I'm gay and I didn't want to be treated." You do a guy's self-defense, you do girls' self-defense, and everybody has a right to protect themselves. They just do. You have a question? He's raising his hand. That's awesome. It's like elementary school.
What happened to the little guy who was bending? You didn't finish the story.
He stalked him all weekend.
Really?
He was asked to leave the convention because he was stalking other people too, and somebody else was braver than I was and actually complained. I almost got him kicked out of one of our panels because he kept talking. And you know me, if you've been to my panels, I actually encourage heckling, because my favorite t-shirt from the 80s said, "I refuse to lose a battle of wits to an unarmed opponent." So I like it when people make smart comments because I'm going to zing you back. But this guy was interrupting the panel and saying inappropriate things, and he wasn't taking the hint. And finally I said, "Look, if you speak again, I have duct tape in my gear bag. Please don't make me use it." And usually that's kind of the hint that, "Shut up." And this guy was quiet for a minute and he goes, "Oh, you mean rape tape?"
Oh shit!
Exactly.
I'm sorry.
And see, that's going to be on my interview. You guys can blame me for that.
We can cut that out.
And this guy, it got dead silent.
Everybody
and everybody
around
moved away from him. And there was like this circle. And I said, "There's nothing funny about that. If you speak again, I will remove you from this panel and the hotel." He goes, "You can't do that." And there was a staffer leaned up against the wall and he goes, "I'll let him." And I went, "So don't." And I thought that would be the end of the problem. It wasn't. He was messed up enough that me actually threatening him with physical violence and removal turned him on. And that's what started this.
See, I would imagine, I know Rusty's done CES, probably a couple game things. The worst thing that just pisses me off is you hear, "Oh, I just got raped." Oh, it's all over the game room, and it's not something you should be saying. And if you bring it up that they shouldn't say it, you're the bad guy now.
Yes. And oh god, I can't believe I'm going to say this while you're recording it. Just remember, you guys should hopefully by now have some sense of who I am and what I believe.
Yes.
Because of my very strong views on abuse, I'm also kind of strong on I'm not a big fan of the morning after rape cry. And like I said, this is going to get into where people are upset.
We'll cut it all out.
A guy shouldn't, we shouldn't have sex on Saturday night, and I think you're all into it and we're having a great time, and then I find out the next day I raped you. Consensual sex is different than rape, and there should be clear lines between them, because I'm a straight guy, and if you try to bend me over the table, I'm going to know I was raped. It's not going to be a question. Because frankly, I'd have to be dead first. But that's my choice. But one of the things about empowering women to be able to say no, resist, is I believe if this is it should be obvious. There is a quarterback that played for Colorado State that had pro aspirations, and he was a good kid, and he was at a party on Friday night, This girl was all over him, groping him, fondling him, and stating publicly 6 or 7 times during the night, during the party, that she would do him any way at any time. And he turned her down. But on Saturday night, they were at a club, and they went home together. She invited him to her house. They sat on the bed. She took off her top and then her bra, and they started making out, and then they had sex. And the next morning, she made him breakfast. They sat at the table, and he left. And her roommate came in and talked to her, and she said, I wanted to sleep with him, but I don't know if I really wanted to sleep with him last night. And I'm not making this up. You can find the article.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I saw you nod right away, because it's been a huge thing on ESPN, and Bill Simmons has written articles about it.
HBO Sports, everywhere. And
this actually has gone to trial. I mean, he was off the football team, and his life is over for something that... And again, this is not in any way, shape, or form to put down women that have been abused at all. But it's just kind of it's an issue for me that it's sensitive, and I can't believe I brought it up because it's not going anywhere. It has nothing to do with our interview.
I also agree with you on the use of the word.
Oh, yeah, because there's nothing else like it.
Yeah.
Saying you got screwed over in a video game, you can say that, but saying, I got raped, no, you didn't. There is nothing else like that. The situation with my publisher, I could say, well, I got raped by my publisher. No, I didn't.
And it's prevalent.
I was given a bad check that screwed us up financially, but the emotional trauma and the distrust, all of those things that go with that, that's completely different. Sorry, brother, if I would have known you were coming in, I would have brought you another one. Did you drink that?
With Jack Daniels.
You said, I don't. It never occurred to me that you put mixed with my. Sorry, I was running around last night and I was like, you drink throwback. You got to have Jack Daniels with that. And I said, I'll bring you a Mountain Dew. So I actually found him at the rave. And I don't normally go to the rave. It's very scary for me.
Well, this one was way too laid back for my kids, so.
You guys didn't line dance. You did last year. We're very disappointed. You actually raised your
Congo
hand.
trans, so.
We were standing in the back wanting to take pictures. No camera gear allowed inside.
I missed
And
the Congo
then,
line.
we sent her up to the
They let
stage.
camera gear in after you guys left.
Well, screw them. I was mad.
Sorry.
But I'm trying to take pictures, and I'm like, oh, there's 13-year-olds driving up. You get out of my shot. I don't want 13-year-old dry humping. This is not a rave. Go away, please.
You know, there was a middle school in Iowa that I taught at that they had to cut out their dances, their middle school dances, because the craze about 10 years ago was they would get a large circle of middle school kids, and then they would shield the chaperones from being able to see what was happening in the middle, and they went from dry humping to actually having sex with their clothes on, but so that they discovered it because after the dance was over and all the kids were gone and they were going to clean the floor, they found evidence. I'm like, my daughter went to that school, and thank God for training and teaching your child how to say no, because the boy went up and was watching her dance in a circle with her friends and looked at her and said, all you need are bigger boobs and a pole and you're set for life. And my daughter freaked. She didn't know what to do. She's kind of, And finally, his friends all laughed, and she was just, and they walked away, and she walked after him, tapped him on the shoulder, and when he turned around, she passed him, hooked him around the neck, and did a choke out over her hip, held him there and said, if you ever say something like that to me again, I'll break your neck, and dropped him on the floor and walked off. And she wouldn't tell me because she thought she overreacted and I would be angry at her. I'm like, angry? I want this kid's name.
That's awesome.
I'm going to go kill his dad. Because what a 12-year-old boy knows about chest size and pole dancing. 12 When I was 12, I was still trying to figure out how Gimli's using a double bit axe against goblins.
It's pretty awesome.
Okay, maybe I was
You
warped
didn't
up.
have video games.
With the advent of everybody doing things on their own, your samurai swords, it sounds like you have a wide array of collection. Do you ever build your own, make your own? There's a lot of DIY stuff out there, and I follow a few podcasts that make knives and do their own thing in welding. Do you ever
I have a
see
couple
yourself-
students who do that, and my best friend actually makes swords. He lives out in Oregon and was apprenticed to Michael Bell, the first man who made Japanese swords out of steel cable. Really, really strong blades. I'm not... I have some artistic talents, but it's more towards mayhem and dismemberment. I'm not good at creating things. So I have a friend who makes them, and I use them. I use the NASCAR analogy all the time. I'm the guy who drives the car, and it's my job to drive as fast as I can, and your job to fix it.
I say, I'm the maintenance man.
She does that. For our students at school, when you have to touch up the edge of the sword and make sure it's just absolute razor sharp, she does that because she's much better at it than I am.
Rewrap
And
handles,
I come up with the
clean up
crazy
sides.
ideas for our school, and she's the engineer that makes them. And I drive her insane with some of the ideas I come up with,
You want to do what?
and she makes them live.
Is there an antique sword that you've either seen or read about that you wish you had?
All of them. I'm also not as discriminating on that stuff as she is. We'll go to sword shows, token kais, and there's literally thousands of blades on tables, and I like every one of them. I'm not saying I want to own all of them, but I like them all because I'm a fan, kind of like girls. I may be afraid of you, but you're all wonderful.
I'm wonderful.
Someday you'll know.
And see, I've really accomplished. Wow. I like every sword, and I'll pick them up, and even if they're not weighted correctly or balanced, they're still a sword, and I appreciate it for what it is. My wife will go through and go, no, no, no. And I'm going, hey, that one was 600 years old. It was made by an ancestor of our sword instructor. And she's like, it's not balanced, right? And it drives me nuts because my current hobby, I like guns. And so we'll go to a gun show, and I'll be, nice, feel the grip on that. And she's like, nope.
No.
No. And then when she does find one, just like with swords, inevitably it's the most expensive one made. And she's that way at sword. The first sword show we went to, here's this pretty little girl, and nobody thinks she knows anything about swords. She's just cute. So the sword vendors are not letting me touch the blades, but taking out priceless heirlooms from under the table for her to look at. And I'll let her wander off, and she comes back. No supervision, and she's carrying
A 13th century
a
Wakanda.
13th century Japanese polearm that's worth $70,000.
That's so
And
shady.
this old guy from Atlanta just handed it to her and said, isn't this pretty? And let her walk off with it. And they don't care whether she knows, and she does, but she just kind of, oh, that's awesome. And she goes running down the middle of the hall, and people are going, oh, along with a sword.
You exaggerate.
A little bit, but it's funnier, my life.
No,
But I like all of them. And we've actually stopped collecting swords because I only have two hands. I can only use two, maybe three with the right.
Back to anime.
And so I have a 700-year-old blade that I take to conventions, and that's what we were just doing our last panel on, the history of sharp, shiny, pointy things. And that's the 700-year-old sword, and the blade my wife uses is actually 300 years old, and one of 13 made. That they were made for the top Shinto shrines in Japan, and it's really, really lightweight and very, very razor sharp. And we've been just kind of blessed that these swords kind of find us. We don't really look for them. It's just with what we do and being an over-the-top personality and being willing to talk to anybody. We encourage people to, look, if you have a sword, bring it in. We'd love to look at it. And 90% of the time, they're catalog blades. They're a decoration. But every once in a while, somebody will bring us in something really, really neat that we get to look at. Oh, my. This is my baby. This is the 700-year-old blade. And as long as this has an engraving on it. It's called a horomono in Japanese. They became in vogue about 150 years ago to have carvings put on the blade. This is original with the blade. And what it is it is an old Japanese ken, the straight sword that they used prior to 700 AD, kind of like the sword from Mulan. And it has an oriental dragon curled around it. It's one of the symbols of the emperor. And this blade, for all that it's a 32-inch cutting edge, it's a very long sword by Japanese standards, was originally longer than this. It's been cut down at least twice, and there are subtle ways to tell when you take the handle off, but one of the easiest ways to tell that this sword was cut down is the horomono. Those engravings normally end about a ½ inch above the habaki, the throat collar here. They normally end about here, and that engraving goes all the way down to right about here under the handle before it ends, which means the blade used to be at least this much longer. And being 700 years old, it was actually used before they were worn edge up through the sash. That didn't start until the 1550s. Prior to that, they were called tachi, and they were worn edge down with hangers, kind of like they were mounted for World War II. And much longer and used normally from horseback more than for hand-to-hand combat on foot. So this is my pride and joy, and it's made me a little bit more discriminating. I mean, let's face it though, if you bring me something shiny, even if it's a $10 collectible sword, I still think it's cool. And I'll still tell you it's awesome and it's really neat. But I have gotten a little bit snobbier because this is the one I get to use, and I still feel guilty about it. Part of why I take it to conventions all over the country and share it, take it out and show it, is because I'm intimidated that I'm its caregiver right now. I mean, who am I to have this? It'll be here long after I'm gone. I mean, 5 years after I'm gone, nobody's going to remember me. The dust will have cleared from the war that my wife and son went to figure out who got to keep the sword and who got the motorcycle. My money's on my son now. Sword combat, my son's 23. I think he can take her. She disagrees. Empty hand, I think stand up, the Muay Thai stuff, my son's better at. The grappling, ground fighting, submission stuff, she's better than he is. So it kind of depends on where they meet for this showdown.
Tannerite.
And who's going to have the sword on back of the motorcycle?
You know, the really bad thing about riding a motorcycle and having a sword is you use a sword right-handed, and that's also the throttle control, so you can't really fight
Yeah,
from
left-handed,
on the back of the motorcycle. Unless you have a British bike, because they have the... I spend way too much time thinking about these things.
Have you guys, with the history of all of this, have you been approached by, and this can be either police and or defense areas, or on the super shiny side, Hollywood, to be trainers for martial arts movies throughout the years?
We've done stunt work for theater groups, Ren Fair acts, and things like that. We did a 12-episode TV series, local in Iowa, called The Way of the Samurai, where we did these different things. But as far as moving up and doing stunt choreography for Hollywood, nobody wants to do. And I'm just going to say this, and you can use it or edit it, or you can make me look like an extreme jerk if you edit this correctly, or incorrectly. Nobody wants realistic combat in a movie because it's boring.
Yeah.
You want jump, spinny. If you remember the movies, the Kill Bill movies,
Right.
the Band of '88, and everybody went, they're Japanese. That's real Japanese sword combat. No, it wasn't. The Band of '88, the members were Japanese, but they received their training at the same Hong Kong stunt college that Jackie Chan and Jet Li went to. The sword techniques and stuff they did were not Japanese battlefield or self-defense movements. The closest anybody's got in the last 15 years for realistic Japanese sword combat was when they made the movie The Last Samurai. And it hurts to say that because I hate Tom Cruise.
That was such a great movie.
Absolutely. That movie was so good that we forgot he was in it. But to make the sword fights work, they actually had to reinvent battlefield sword combat. When you watched him doing the footwork across the hardwood floor when he first put on the hakama and he was doing those movements with the long, deep stances were recreated from old training manuscripts for the naginata, the Japanese polearm, because no one fights that way anymore. People who use a naginata to fight do it for kendo, for sports sword, and a shinai, the weapon they use in kendo, is very, very lightweight slivers of bamboo laced together with leather, so that it weighs, the graphite ones weigh just over an ounce. And this sword weighs 2.5 pounds. And the way you stand and hold it and swing is very different than it is when you're using something really lightweight. And so your stances, everything's different. And we teach it realistic way, because when the zombie apocalypse happens, and it is coming, you know how I know? because what's his name signed off for World War Z 2. Brad Pitt has signed on.
wow.
They're doing the movie. The zombie apocalypse is coming. You want to be able to make the right movements. So we don't do a lot of that. And for the really cool stuff, it's so easy to do CGI now.
Yeah.
I mean, when the first Blade movie came out with Wesley Snipes, he's a legit martial artist. He does Filipino martial arts, the sticks and the. So his combat scenes were really good. A little bit stylized. You know, you get the big bam and holds the pose that little bit extra while you're waiting for the camera flash, and then he moves into the next thing. That would get you beat up in a street fight. But this fight scenes are pretty well done. And then Blade 2 came out, and the fight scenes were CGI. I mean, really bad CGI, and you could tell. And there's no market for what we do that way. People love it in AnimeCon. We do if anybody was at our sword class on Friday night, we're not going to talk numbers because the fire marshal might hear this video or this interview. But we had many more people in the room than we were supposed to.
Right.
Because there's interest in it and it's fun and exciting, but nobody really wants to watch it because I don't do jump spinning butterfly kicks with a sword in each hand in a bikini. I tried.
So without the Hollywood side,
Some things you cannot unsee.
Welcome to my nightmare.
so without the Hollywood side, do the real life police officers in your area, are you able to teach not only the women in self-defense, things like that, which is obviously, something you want to do, but do police or FBI or anybody
We've
else?
had a lot of the local police officers in our area. We're Johnson County, Iowa, or Iowa City, Coralville area. We've had a lot of the police have trained at our school, but to be honest with you, most cops, contrary to the Hollywood image of Steven Seagal and Chuck Norris as cops, where every waking moment is spent perfecting their craft, most cops, when they're off duty, they want out of that life. They don't want to think about it. They don't want to be reminded that it's a nasty world and that they just had to tase 4 guys who were beating on a child. They want to barbecue with their kids. So what they do is we have a tremendous number of policemen's kids who have been put in our school to learn the self-defense stuff. And we did work with the National Guard units in our area when they were first being deployed. And that was, on the one hand, it was really neat. On the other hand, it was very sobering because I was teaching sentry removal techniques and stuff in a very safe environment where I got to pretend I was all tough and bad, and the people I was teaching who can't tell right from left are going and putting their lives on the line, and what I'm teaching them may make the difference between whether they live or die. And that scared me. It didn't make me feel arrogant and I train our troops. Made me feel responsible for them.
Yeah.
And guilty that they were going over and putting their lives on the line, and I got to go home to my wife every night and go, how was class? Because it's a safe environment. So we do work with them some, but again, most of the police don't want to do that off duty. And for most people, if you join the military, you get basic training, and it's called basic for a reason. It is equivalent. The self-defense you learn is very, very streamlined, hardcore, designed for mostly don't quit. It's to teach you to keep going, and the level of training that you get is it's not what you're going to get just training at a good school for a year, because again, 8 weeks, and hand-to-hand combat's not supposed to be a big part of today's Army. You have an AR-15 for that, and if you don't have an AR-15, you have a Colt 1911, and you have buddies, and you have air support, and my favorite self-defense weapon is the neutron bomb. I don't have to even get my hands dirty. I was sitting on my couch, and there's a button on my remote control. One will record, the Avengers when they're on, and whichever basketball game, because I think the Thunder play again on Monday. And then there's this little red button at the bottom that says, do not press. That's my self-defense button. Sorry, I also have a hard time being serious for very long because I'm really intense about these things. So if you see me on stage, act like this, and I do really silly things because I am 6'7". I weigh 250 pounds, and I'm very passionate about what I do, and I make people nervous.
Does he run around and go, ha ha, you're a girl?
I'm afraid of women. Who are you kidding? I thought 25 years of martial training would help me not be afraid of women. I'm more afraid of women now than I was when I started. You know why? Because at our school, we're a lot like dogs. We have a social pecking order that's determined by alpha and beta. And if you train at my school, there's only one reason you train from me, because I can kick your ass. If I can't, don't train with me. If you can beat me, you teach class. But that means when we're training, you guys are sparring, and when I say, time, break it up, you will. Because if you don't, I will make you. And after the first time I knock you dizzy, you'll line up right for me. Because we have that guy thing, that's a connection. You know what? She won't. She won't. See, she's already told because she's a redhead. And in addition to having no soul, and do you see that little cute hurt look? That just makes her more dangerous. The reason why grizzly bears don't scare me is you already know when you look at them, they'll kill you. She looks cute.
She's terrifying. She's quieter.
I know, she makes me even more nervous, but I was hoping you wouldn't bring her into this. Girls, when they start sparring, I mean, you guys start sparring, no matter how mad you are at each other, when I say, break time, and get in between you, you'll stop. Because I'm your instructor, you're conditioned to obey the head. These two start sparring, and you know what? All bets are off. Timer goes off, and I will have to physically separate
I'll put
you.
money on her.
Well, that was me having to separate two girls who were sparring. We don't even let the girls spar with each other anymore. They have to spar with the guys, and the guys don't want to spar with them. You know why else? Because if we spar...
Does that mean we can get a little preview just of you two sparring later?
I'm just so happy.
When I spar with her, it's not pleasant. It's very short, and it's not worth watching, because I will have her on the ground disarmed in less than 3 seconds, because it's my only chance. If it goes on very long, I'm going to get hurt. And I will take every time, and we free spar with swords, boken. But it ends very, very abruptly because people forget. I mean, for all the jokes, she's really, really competent and very, very capable as a martial artist. But I'm a lot bigger and stronger and faster than she is, and I'm her instructor. Which means I may have taught her everything she knows, but I didn't teach her everything I know. And I'm keeping that edge as long as I can.
You still have to sleep sometime.
Which is why I don't sleep well. Or late.
But
Now we
breaking
know the
up the
background.
girls.
Breaking up the girl. You know why she brought that back up? Because the last time at our school, we were doing kickboxing. Stand up only, just hands and feet, no elbows, knees, no tying up, nothing. Just boxing and kicking. We had two girls sparring, and they ended up on the ground, rolling across the floor, pulling hair, kneeing each other in the groin, swearing and screaming. And I'm like, time, oh my God. And nobody would help because they were all afraid. And I literally had to grab them, pick them up and separate them. And as soon as I had them pulled apart where they couldn't reach each other, they attacked me. One bit my arm and the other one was clawing at me and kicking my legs. And I asked my wife to please stop.
My sister's the one that bit
But
you.
she wanted to. It was my wife and her sister. And girls are, they are
I
just,
understand.
they are that violent.
Every girl by like 3 years old knows you don't get into the middle of a cat fight. You
And according to the Marine Corps Service Manual, the reason why women were not used as frontline troops had nothing to do with their inability to bench press their own body weight, which is what keeps them out of most of the special forces units like the SEALs. There's just things you can't do with upper body strength that are required for those small unit insertion stuff. The reason why women have not been used traditionally as frontline troops is they are uncontrollable during combat. Once the battle lines cross, they stop following orders because that blood haze that they fight in berserker mode. If you have a Dungeons and Dragons character that's a berserker, you have just described every woman who's ever trained at my school. And it's either the Marine Corps or the Army Service Manual. One of my guys brought it in because I have a number. I'm like the only member of my family that was not career military. And go figure, I teach this stuff. I'm the violent one. My brother works for Raytheon. They make cruise missiles, and I'm the bad one.
Speaking of girls and swords and zombie apocalypses,
I like how you put that together. We're going to make this movie, you and I.
what do you think of Michonne's character on Walking Dead and how she uses her katana?
Edit.
You don't use a blade that long one-handed. You can use a Japanese sword one-handed, but the weight and the balance was intended for two-handed use. And when you watch her cut from right to left, holding the weapon in your right hand, like this, and I watch The Walking Dead. I love that show. It's the best soap opera ever. Because it is a soap opera.
Right.
But it does have zombies in it. When you make this motion, the sword's going to go right out of your hand. Or if you hit something, it's going to pop out really easily. And when she's cutting through 3 zombies in a row this way, it's all stylized. And her free hand isn't even being used correctly to protect herself or to counterbalance. And she wears it on her back, which is fine, but you don't draw a sword from your back unless the blade is shorter than your arm. And I shouldn't have to explain why. I do help people in cosplay because they want to know how to do their weapons. And I'm really tall, but I can't draw a standard World War II katana, 26.5-inch blade, from my back without doing a cheat method. And one of the ways you cheat is you put your bottom hand holds the end of the scabbard, the saya, here, and you see them do it because it's supporting it, but you're pulling down, so you're actually drawing like this. And you still have to be careful. When you see some of the old Dungeons and Dragons, swords and sorcery movies they made in the 80s, what you had a split scabbard, so that from here down, this was open. So that you would start the draw and then finish by being able to make that loop. And what made it work for European swordsmanship and not for Japanese is if you look at like the old broadswords, remember Conan the Barbarian and that monster sword he had? The first 12 to 15 inches of that blade coming from the handguard forwards wasn't sharp. So having that sit in an open pouch, open sheath, was safe. Most Japanese swords are sharp right from here on down, so you can't do that.
You big Bruce Lee movie fan?
I was actually a bigger fan of Brandon Lee, his son. He made, forget about Laser Mission, that was horrid, but he made a movie as a tribute to his dad and to Jeet Kune Do called Rapid Fire, that he just put on a clinic of the different parts of Jeet Kune Do, and his turning, doing a Muay Thai roundhouse kick up through the banister on the stairwell in one of the fight scenes. Oh, I love that movie. And The Crow, I'm really bad about spending money. I'm cheap, obnoxious, terrible when we go out to eat. Even for a con, if you're paying for our meals, don't show me a menu with the prices on it because I'll pick the cheapest thing. So that's why we like ASIN. They have menus printed for the guests that don't have the prices in the private dining room, and then I can just order what I want. She normally does all the buying because I'm like that old grumpy guy, Walter, from the Jeff Dunham show. I'm just a nasty man, like, and that old TV, what's it, In Living Color? Good Lord, that's a lot of money. How about I give you $2 and you give me the stuff off the lid? I'm that guy.
He'll get a different bag of chips at the store because it's 2 cents cheaper than the one he wanted.
Even if it's generic and I know it's going to make me sick.
It's cheaper.
Exactly, see?
No judgment.
I have no idea what the question was now, because now I'm just
We're talking
lost
about
in
The Crow.
spending money.
Guessing you
But
spent a lot of money.
I went to The Crow in the movie theater 6 times.
Me too.
Because that movie was amazing. And the fact that it came out after he died on the set.
First 5 minutes, which is actually the last one.
It was the last scene with Michael Wincott going, bang! And there's so much, you talked about us getting involved in the Hollywood scene. The stunt director for that movie was a martial artist named Jeff Imada. I know him, and I know people that work with him. And what happened with that movie, Jeff Imada, was one of his jobs was to check the weapons every night, because they use blanks, but blanks are cartridges with paper and explosive powder, and when you shoot, there's still stuff that comes out. And one of the things Jeff Amata did was at the end of the night when they went, he cleaned the weapons and he physically checked them. Which, as an antique sword, we clean the weapons every time. When we get back to our room, we drew this out. We're going to have to clean it and wipe it down. But Jeff Amata checked the weapons. Because all of the shooting sequences were done, except for one, they let him go because they didn't want to have to pay him for another week's salary.
Yep.
So a movie that grossed over $200 million, they cut Jeff Amata because they didn't want to pay him the extra $2,000. And the guy who put the props on, it wasn't his fault, he wasn't trained, it wasn't really his job, just took the gun they were going to use the next day. It had been used for something, and he just opened the cylinder, made sure that it was empty, and put it away and didn't look down the barrel. And there was wadding stuck on the side of the barrel, one of the revolvers, and that was the gun Michael Wincott used the next day. And he was supposed to, if you're on stage, if you're shooting from right there, if I'm shooting him, this looks like I'm aimed right at him from your vantage point. He's not flinching because my finger's pointed right here.
Right.
And that's how you do stage combat. Michael Wincott screwed up. He was in character, he was in the feeling what was going on, and he went, bang! And the charge blew the wadding out the barrel and hit Brandon Lee, and he died. And it was a huge, unfortunate series of circumstances where everything had to go wrong in a sequence to make it happen, and it did. And I was devastated. Brandon Lee is the same age that I am, born in 1965. Son of Bruce Lee. I was a huge fan. And to make it worse, I had a friend of mine at work was recording the Bruce Lee movies because they were on. Cinemax was doing a series thing.
Yeah.
And so my friend was recording the movies and bringing them to me at work, and he had just brought me Game of Death. Game of Death was the last of Bruce Lee's movies, and in the movie, he was a movie actor who faked his own death to go undercover and beat the mob, but he faked his death on set. I had just watched that movie, came into work the next day, no lie. And John came up to me and said, did you hear about Brandon Lee? He died on set last night. I'm like, it's very funny. I just watched Game of Death last night. I'm not that easy a mark. We had to go into the office and pull up the news, and that's how I found out that Brandon Lee had died. It was devastating.
Hopefully James, the guy that wrote it, and Eliza can get their petition through and not remake it. But they want
It's Hollywood. They
want
remake.
Statham. Well, see, James still owns the rights to it, so he is very.
They're going to
much-
have Jason Statham do it?
James O'Barr offered him $2 million not to make it.
See, some things shouldn't be redone. If you're gonna, I'm a big fan of Firefly coming back. Don't redo it. Just have Nathan come back and take it up.
Well, Anthony's dead now. I mean, she died shortly after a car accident.
Yeah.
There's not very many
So-
that cast.
It's. I'm a big believer that Hollywood should still be coming up with new ideas. Not all the good movie ideas came out in the '80s. I agree, most of them did.
Well,
But you don't need to keep remaking
Well, we
them.
have our Jesus remake who shoots people in dick. It's called RoboCop. It's amazing.
I saw the remake for RoboCop.
I'm sorry?
because I saw the original.
Did you see the remake of Enter the Dragon? It's called Mortal Kombat.